People ask me, should I follow my gut feeling or not? And I'm like, which part of that is an impulse, as in you behaving in the same way, reacting to things out of having always done that, out of fear, out of defending yourself, out of expectations, out of fear of judgment. And so that part you want to let go of. And which part of that is instead the true version of yourself that says, I want to emerge, I want to come out. And hence, let's make room for that.
Welcome back to the Carlitos show. Today the guest is Caterina Lurani. I'm very excited to share this conversation because it was one of the most impactful that I've had in the last year. Caterina is a coach and a startup investor with a background as researcher, operator, and venture capitalist. Today we deep dive her unique coaching style.
It's again the balance between the detachment and being back in the outer world. People ask me, how can I achieve more and more and more without being in a needy mindset, without being in my not enoughness conversation? Because it's easy to achieve a lot if you just think, I don't have enough. I have to make more money, I have to fundraise more, I have to have higher revenues, I have to write more, I have to have more followers. How can I push for all of that, or the part of that which is healthy and allowing me to expand as an individual, coming from a place of, I actually have enough?
What really stuck with me about Caterina is how she brings together the outer and the inner world. When she sits with an entrepreneur, the conversation often starts with the outer world. So, strategy, operations, sales, whatever. But often the conversation turns into the inner world. So what are the doubts, the fears, the personal belief that the person might have? And through her experience and deep intuition, she guides entrepreneurs becoming aware of what unconsciously is holding them back, and she helps them take action in order to transform not only their business, but especially themselves as individuals. To be honest, for me, it's not easy to share this episode because what started as an interview turned into a personal coaching session. You'll hear it. But I'm happy to share it anyway because I think you can relate to some of the topics we've talked about. And it might be just as valuable for you as it was for me.
Everyone is resisting coaching because sometimes you hear, let's do this. I wanted to ask you something so people can see resistance in real life.
So with that said, enjoy the episode. And I'm really curious to understand what was motivating you in each step of your career and which were the main steps that required somehow an identity upgrade, because I felt there had been somehow you had to work with your identity, especially at the beginning. And to give some context, when you were like working as a research, Bocconi with Stanford, and you were about to start a PhD with Berkeley, and I understood that something very important happened in the trajectory of your career. So I want to understand, how did you navigate that step?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. I think that the main driver was ambition back by then. And it was both, outer world ambition of proving myself and receiving the badge of, being admitted to Berkeley or working at research projects that were promoted by MIT or Stanford. And at the same time, I had, I think, an ambition of proving to myself that I could do something. Like, I remember several times in my life sort of setting a goal for myself, which wasn't in the end something that I wanted others to know about. It was more like, I want to prove to myself that I'm smart enough or intelligent enough. I remember my sister saying when we were, already 20, I think. She was saying that I was obsessed with intelligence. That intelligence was like the new sexy for me. And that was the driver of everything I would do. And I think she was right. So I think that was an element back by then where I would say, what's the hardest intellectual challenge that is in front of me? And I would lean into it.
But you was just doing it for yourself? As a challenge with yourself?
I'm trying to think if I'm honest with myself about this. For sure not for my parents. My parents were like, why on earth would you go to Berkeley? My mom wanted me to be a poet. So that was
interesting.
That was
normally it's the other way around. Normally
it's the other way around. I don't think it was actually a lot for other people. It was mostly for myself. For sure, there was a mechanism related to parents in the early stages that where that was rooted. But I think a part of that was also, for example, with mathematics. I've my mom is a primary school teacher, and the tradition in our families that so the tradition that I somehow breathed, let's say it this way, the story that I have interpreted into my family story is that women are not particularly strong or good at like scientific and mathematical topics. And so I think if part of myself was like, I want to break free from that paradigm. I want to create a new standard. I don't want to be that type of woman that my mom is, which I think was more, you know, the individuation process of you grow out of your family mechanism for then obviously going back into it. I remember thinking many things about what I would have done differently from my mom, and then so many are actually much more similar than I would have thought, which I love. So I think that a big part was that. And then, you know, in the choice of then at some point not going to Berkeley, that's why I always say I tend to think that it was mostly something I wanted to prove to myself. Because when I then got admitted, I didn't tell anyone. It was like, I remember reading the email at night just before going to bed and being like, not even sharing with my back by then partner. But I think what was relevant for me was at that point something else emerged, which I now recognize, but I didn't know at that point. I think I started to have, I always had, but it was a bit more in the background, a strong connection with something that was beyond the outer world achievements. And I think especially in those years, that connection was a lot with nature. Those were the years where I was in the mountains a lot. And I was spending all of my free times basically every weekend, either training, climbing, or ski touring, and really pushing my body, and especially I think my nervous system, I now see it, and my mental capacity to feel risk and to accept risk a lot. Again, that was for sure, that was a way more external ambition, I think. That was not just for myself, but that was way more external. To achieve things in the mountains, which again was driven, you know, from the same desire of proving that I as a woman could do something that only men were doing around me. I grew up in the mountains with a very male-dominated group of friends, and being the only woman, I always had the default mindset of I will never be able to do what they do. Like I don't have their same experience or their same body capabilities, and a big part of myself was, you know, I want to prove to myself that I can. And I think that mechanism, right now, I don't even think it was conscious, but if I look at it from the perspective of the work I do today, I can see the traits of achieving something. And I think in those processes, one part of, for me, was disconnecting from those outer world achievements and connecting with how I was really feeling in my life, how I was connecting with people, how I was connecting with myself, how I was connecting with nature. And what happened while I was deciding about Berkeley was several different things, including a very psychosomatic reaction of my body where I didn't have any accident, but my knee started hurting. So I couldn't perform in the mountains anymore. I actually had crutches for a while. And I realized that was an excuse I was using for not actually going to Berkeley. And the other part was the two people passed away in my family circle, and they were in different ways people who had a very strong connection with community, and a very strong connection with the spiritual realm. And I didn't know back by then, but I remember explicitly thinking, wow, I could pass away as well tomorrow. And what if this happens and I hadn't lived my best life? And I've spent the last 5 years, you know, closed up in a lab in Berkeley doing theorem and proof, which is something that I'm not even very good at, which really requires a lot of effort for me. And it's not a place where I'm really flying or flowing. That's just how I spent my last 5 years. So that very intuitive thought came into my brain, and it really opened up a new way of looking at reality for me, where I was like, maybe that's just not how I want to live. Like, very egoistical. Like, I just want to live a
But
different
you were
life.
claiming yourself, yeah.
I was claiming my time, I think, most of all, and I was claiming a connection with what I really wanted to do outside of what were, you know, the expectations that I had about myself, my intelligence, or anything I wanted to prove to myself. And it was freeing. It was freeing to be able to say no to Berkeley. And I'm obviously grateful that I had absolutely no external pressure to go to Berkeley other than myself. But for sure it helped. The coincidences of life in that time. And I can see in my work with people today, I can see how hard it is to overcome the expectations we have about ourselves and how needed sometimes it is to actually go all the way through and sort of prove ourselves about something and then become able to say, well, then I don't need it anymore. Like once I've proven myself about that. And so I'm very respectful when I see people having high expectations about themselves. I know how much better life is when you kind of unpack that defense structure, but I also think it's something that we kind of build up in especially I think in the teenage, and so the late childhood, and so I'm very respectful with that. I love to walk people through the process of seeing step by step how does it feel to let go of those expectations, which I totally still have in different ways.
But that is the work that you do with them.
Yeah.
So all of the people are not like, I want to be more productive, I want to achieve more, so I'm going to follow the script I've been following. You are like showing them that there is a script that they are following and unpacking that. So it's always required, right, in the work you're doing.
Yes, for sure. I think if I'm hearing your question correctly, I think what you're asking is that some people are, and correct me if I'm wrong, some people come in and they already know that they have those expectations and they want to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't.
Yeah, some people are just helping be more productive,
Exactly.
helping me achieve more
Exactly.
at Berkeley, for example.
And I have total respect for that as well, because I myself many times do not have the awareness of the expectations that I have about myself, and only afterwards, in hindsight, I have the capability of saying, oh wow, like look how I was behaving because I had that expectation. And so if they come to me and we quickly land into seeing the expectation, then what generally lies, for example, I have a client who's very young, and he's finishing his studies, building a startup, and working for a couple of AI companies in San Francisco to make money in the meantime. And he's very clear about the fact that he does all of that because he has high expectations about himself. And yet, even if you know, it's not that once you know, you're like, okay, let's let go of the expectation, done. But generally, that is rooted into more long-term thoughts that have been, sort of piling up over the years about ourselves. And so that generally becomes the work. We try to spot when the expectation is operating and where it comes from in a very intuitive way. I'm not a psychotherapist. I don't have a background in mental health. So the way I guide people is always through intuition and with a lot of respect for what the story might have been before that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, when did you started to understand that your ability to follow intuition and help others follow intuition was actually one of your superpower, if you think it is? Well, I guess it is, because everybody is telling me so. How did it came up to you?
That's a good question. I mean, I never thought about it so explicitly, but I think it is absolutely true. And I think, first of all, I want to share something that I learned recently in a conversation with a friend. And I asked her, what would be your intuition? What does your intuition tell you to do? She was asking me about a job transition she's going through. And she said, my intuition or my impulse? And we sort of separated, and I'm not sure whether this is the correct definition of both, but the way, and that's why I love doing this work, being a non-native speaker, and often or sometimes with non-native speakers on the other side, we say we give a definition to words, right? And we use them in that way, and then they define them in that way. They bring language into their own lives, which is an extremely relevant part of our work. And so in this case, we connected impulses more with the sort of what I have always been doing, and so the reaction way of operating, and the intuition more with the gut feeling and what I actually want to do, but so society, my history, past traumas are preventing me from doing. Again, not sure whether this is the literal definition of them, but it's very useful to distinguish, because then this helps us saying, people ask me, should I follow my gut feeling or not? And I'm like, which part of that is an impulse, as in you behaving in the same way, reacting to things out of having always done that, out of fear, out of defending yourself, out of expectations, out of fear of judgment or self-judgment. And so that part you want to let go of. And which part of that is instead the true version of yourself that says, I want to emerge, I want to come out. And hence, let's make room for that. Because, you know, if we're discussing about whether a founder should pair up with this investor or not, if we're discussing whether a founder should hire this CTO or someone else, if we're discussing whether someone should open a new market and whether that is actually the right thing to do, you know, we have this both strategic and very rational conversation, and then there is always a conversation that we try to facilitate, which is more related to the intuition. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So to go back to your question, that was a long introduction. I think it didn't happen consciously, but it was something that people were recognizing me, and so they were following the lead. And I think that's what I have experienced while guiding people in the mountains as well, where I always felt I don't really know what I'm doing here, because I always had people that were more experienced or could perform better than me in the mountains. And so when I was guiding someone else, I was always in this very strong beginner's mindset, where I was like, I'm going to do this, but you know, I don't really know what I'm doing. And that helped me to follow my intuition, and I think allowed people to actually recognize that the intuition was beyond the authority, beyond the outer world recognition of whether I was doing well or not. The intuition was actually helpful. It was in practice allowing them to tap into a version of themselves that were making them happier and more successful in their lives. And I think it's also beautiful because sometimes we do not follow intuition. There's times where I work with someone, we're thinking about hiring someone, and we see the intuition, but you know, sometimes the defense structure or decision making with the co-founder prevail, and then in hindsight we can look at it and see, okay, actually there was a right element of intuition that I could have followed, or someone in a transition. And so I think that there is a lot of freedom for people in choosing whether they want to follow the intuition or not, but it's a muscle to notice what the intuition is actually saying.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I can tell by my own experience that whenever I took a decision which turned out to be wrong was mainly because of some expectation that I or others had on myself. But yeah, whenever you take a decision and it's not coherent with your intuition, something comes back that you're like, oh, I should have listened to my intuition. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But how does it work for people that, I mean, you are very well trained in this muscle and you're strong with this muscle. Like, simple question, but how does it work with someone who maybe is very, very technical, follow processes, follow best practices, and ask you, how do I follow the intuition? I mean, probably the question is already failing because you cannot answer to how do I follow intuition with a specific answer or a specific process. But I'm curious to know, when someone is always up here, how do you allow him to tap into what is here, the intuition?
So I think there's two categories, and I mean, obviously there's way more, but I tend to categorize, from this perspective, two major categories. So one is the scientists and one is the more like the business people. And they don't need to be a scientist or a business people. It's just tags that I use. So the scientist type is in their head, as in they literally have never tapped into the intuition or the body. And so they're extremely rational. But they're honest with themselves. They are fully in intellectual honesty. They just don't know. Like they just have never, like they look at reality from experiment, result, cause and effect perspective. With those people, what we do is that sometimes I let them work. I try to bring them back into the body concretely. And I do, especially if we're working in person, I do work that helps them move into the body with spaciousness, for example, with constellation work, for example. And I have them use the scientific field and that rationality applied to what their intuition is actually telling them. And what is beautiful about those people is that when they see the truth, they immediately recognize it. They don't have, I mean, this is a generalization, but they often do not have too strong defense structures. Like the truth is the truth, even if it's ugly for them. Because they have way less judgment toward how they should appear, because it's their scientific mind goes straight to the truth, to the rational. And many times with them is a process of allowing them to wear someone else's shoes, for example, because they're very rigid, like they do not have empathy as a default. That's also something that I tend to do not have. They, as a default, they're rational about people. It's like, well, Carlos, you're in this place in your life. Obviously, this is what you shouldn't be doing next. And why don't you do it? Like, I don't have the capacity to see all the nuances of, the fears or the expectations or the judgment that are holding you back from doing what rationally I think you should do. So with those people is sometimes we go into their own behaviors. And so looking at their own behaviors, we can see that there is more than the rational decision that is allowing them to operate. So I tell them, look, this is what you said about yourself, or this is what you did in that meeting, or this is the decision that you took in that setup. Why did you do that? It wasn't the most rational thing. And then we can see that there are more layers. And then this helps them land the layers at a deeper level. If in some cases there is a person specifically that I work with and she sits in South Africa who does somatic work, and if that is needed, I love to tap into her knowledge. And this is for the scientists. And I love them because once they see it, they immediately recognize it. And for the business type of profile instead, what holds them back from the intuition, so the truest version of themselves, is the story that they tell themselves. So they are in the brain in the sense that they use the brain to say, I am amazing in this or that way, or I am not enough in this or that way. And it's a story that they craft and is extremely well crafted. Like if you meet them at head level, wherever you approach it, they are right. Like it's just like professional craft. And what I do with them is that I use reframing and mirroring a lot. So I feel where they want to go in reality, and I tell them, look, in your words, I could hear X, Y, Z. And so I literally take notes of the single sentence that they shared to describe a situation or describe how they felt. And I help them see how that sentence hides something more. And it's often the words they use to define something that tell us there is something hidden there. And then once we see what is hidden there, we can see the story. And so once the story is available, so I don't believe in myself ultimately because of X, Y, Z. I'm going to give you an example. There's a founder I'm working with who's selling an amazing product, and he's sold millions. He's had revenues in millions for that product, but right now the market is not as good as, so he's struggling to sell. And we realized, talking about it, he was telling me about how he shows up with clients. He has like big clients that are big accounts. And I said, look, what I'm hearing from your words, you're not saying this, but what I'm hearing is that you show up with a lot of energy, with a lot of enthusiasm for your product, but you ultimately think that these people will never be able to understand the value of the product. They don't know what, I don't want to give details because of confidentiality, but they don't know where your product lies. They don't know the value of the space. Let's say it's health. They don't know the value of health. Ultimately.
That's his assumption.
This is like his unconscious assumption.
Mm-hmm.
And hence they will never be able to grasp the value of your product. And you actually despise them because of this. You know, you work so hard for health. Like there's such a strong projection to make health something relevant in people's lives that you try to sell them something, but you despise them. And you think that they are not smart enough, connected with themselves enough to understand the value of health and hence to value your product. And he was like, that is true.
Oh, crazy.
And we realized that obviously he's not being able to sell because unconsciously his words are saying my product is amazing and I really love it and I like this is his truth. But unconsciously he's adding, but I believe you're an idiot and you will never actually grasp the value of this.
And unconsciously they hear it.
And unconsciously they hear it. Obviously they are totally in the unconscious, you know, imagine how packed their day is. Like this is a minimum, you know, filament of information that comes into their everyday schedule and activity. So they don't know all of this that is behind. But once we could see it, it was so clear and we just had this like enlightening moment. And for him was like, now he could see the intuition because I saw it for him. And then the more people see the intuition, the more they act on it. So it was like, okay, how can I get into those conversations without judgment? In this case, it's judgment that he brings in. And it's judgment toward them. And hence, I always say, when we judge other people so strongly, that judgment is rooted in our system and is true about ourselves. And so, and also you can only see in others that which is already within yourself. So if there is that strong judgment, there is a root of that in yourself. And so the fact that he was able to land into those conversations with an open mindset and be like, my product is amazing and I'm not making an assumption about who's sitting in front of me. I just want to gift them my product. This is incredible value. I'm not even selling it. I'm sharing the value because if they buy, they're going to get a value, a share of this value, and I'm going to get money for an exchange of value for money, which is going to create additional value on this market. And the moment in which he was able to enter the conversation that way, obviously his sales just spiked. And it was powerful because obviously when people experience this, then something clicks in their mind and it's like, okay, this inner work that allows me to understand what is going on at a deeper level for myself is unlocking sales, which is obviously is their KPI in the end. And so all of a sudden you allow them to get into the work because they see the effect. And then obviously, you know, we worked on why there was that judgment. And that judgment is rooted into who he is. And then at the larger level, the judgment allows him to become a better version of himself outside of the sales conversation. So it's I think almost a circle where they can go that deep.
Mm-hmm. Wow, incredible. I guess you needed a lot of conversation with him before pointing out about this unconscious behavior.
This was we had 2 conversations in person and 2 calls.
And then you found out this part.
But we found out also other things. But I think there's things that I don't hear in clients. And I'm looking forward to the day in which I will be able to hear them. And I hear them after a lot of time. And there's things that you can spot very quickly if you listen thoroughly. And I think I never saw myself as a thorough listener because I like talking a lot. But I think that ultimately there is, you know, I've put many, many hours in this. And I always say, this has been my mindset since I was probably able to think. I'm just obsessed with these topics. And it's not because I ever thought they could be a job. It was just a need I had as a human to sort of understand and master and go deeper into these human dynamics. So those were hours that I've put in, and automatically this now makes it natural for me to hear something that otherwise I wouldn't hear. And again, there's so much more that is there to be had. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you had this need since you were able to think? So not once you were like going through the PhD journey, but even before you had this need?
Way more.
Why, if I can ask you?
I don't know. I think it's... I think it was, I would say, like, some of my friends, they look at the bridge and they're like, I wonder how many like kilos of steel were needed to build the bridge. And I'm like, I don't really care. Like, A, I would absolutely not be able to guess. B, I don't care. At the same time, when they were doing that and they were like probably 10 years old, little engineer today, I was thinking like, why did that person behave that way in that situation? What drives these questions at the deeper level, I don't know. But I think it was also something I needed, as in I experienced human dynamics at a very deep level, always. And I think that depth was painful when I was younger. It was painful for sure when I was a teenager, and led me to this need to understand. And I think also the understanding was sometimes had a high risk of degenerating in manipulation, because I could understand things much better than people who were my age. And luckily enough, I think I learned through people that supported me in the way, I learned how to use that to support others rather than to manipulate them.
That's a good thing.
I could be a great evil.
Yeah, of course. And what I can also see that even though you're super introspective and able to understand all of these aspects, you're very like always looking at the action, right? Because what I'm wondering is, I know some people that maybe they do have a great intuition and they live a lot inside themselves rather than into the world. So they have a constant loop within themselves, trying to unfold a layer of an onion after another, that they lose contact with the action in the outer world. While I see you are very active in the outer world, right?
Yeah. I love the outer world.
Yeah.
I ultimately love it.
Maybe it goes in circles, I don't know. Actually, the reason why I'm telling you this is because I think that over the last few years, I think I started looking at the inner world, while before I was somehow ignoring it. And because of that, now I'm feeling that I'm spending too much time in the inner world and less in the outer world. I found out over the last 2 years that I am really introspective, and I can't tell like good or bad, but I'm able to unfold layers after layer after layers. But what I've noticed is that I spend the last months more into that and a little bit forgetting about the outer world. So more, I need to unfold other layers and fix stuff before going out into the world. But I think you should do the two things in parallel, because probably you don't have enough time to, there's always another layer and you got to do something into the world. So maybe I give you a little bit of context here.
Yes.
So basically what you said before, right, about becoming a researcher, like you were probably following a script, something you are supposed to do, and because of nature, because of what happened in your family, you were able to open your eyes and recognize that. Something similar, I would say, happened when I was 2 years ago. I was 23 years old. I got a terrible psoriasis, so I had red patches all over my skin from the neck to my toes, and I'm like, wow, my body knows something that I don't. And it turned out that the psoriasis was, the doctor said because of stress, even though I didn't feel stress at all. And then in order to cure the psoriasis, I did 3 months in Bologna, so I'm back to my hometown doing some sunbath. And that was a very important period of my life, because during those months, I was always like in Berlin, and during that time traveling a lot to Milan, and I loved what I was doing with my job. I was working a lot. but I think I was just in the outer world. I was just in the yang, and I was just following the story that I've told myself, which was I want to become an entrepreneur. I want to build my own company. These tech entrepreneurs are my idols, and I'm working now in this tech company because I'm learning, and I will be more prepared once I find my idea. And parenthesis, like all the work experiences that I was doing, apart from some which I was very engaged, were more, okay, I'm gonna do this experience because it's gonna bring me closer to that story. And so going back to what happened is during those months, I was back to Bologna, so slow paced. And like, to be honest, like before coming to Berlin, I was really looking forward to living Bologna in that slow paced environment. I was working from office, so from home, so more time. And then third, like because of some other reasons at Temple, we had to slow down the expansion plan. And I started yoga, and I had a lot of time to introspect. And I don't know if there is a correlation, but probably with moving your body with yoga, some things move. Let's say, and what I became aware is that I also mentioned you this last time, but just to tell you again, why did I have that story of I want to become successful? Many reasons, but I would say the first one is, to make it short, I moved to Italy when I was 2 years old. The first years when I was in Italy weren't very easy for my parents, especially my mom. I think that for some reason she wasn't able to integrate, and she was very talented and successful in Cuba. She was an engineer, she was managing people, she was satisfied in all aspects in her life. Then probably she comes here, she's alone. We had a big family in Cuba. And the first job interview she does don't go so well. So she lost somehow confidence in herself. And I was like the thing that allowed her to continue her hustle, or at least that was the story she was telling to herself. So I have to go through all of this struggle because of Carlos. And she was saying this to me. So Carlos, look, we are doing these sacrifices for you. You have to be great because we're doing these sacrifices for you. And then I also noticed that because of the work I've done with Rupta, if you want we can deep dive, that somehow my mom also was having like back problems because she started working as a cleaner, which is fine, but she was doing that job because she was like, I cannot get another job, I can only do this job. And I found out because the work with Rupa, and it really come out of nowhere through the somatic work, that I developed a sense of guilt toward my mom because like she's struggling and it's because of me, then I'm responsible. So I always wanted to be successful, to be able to pay them back for their sacrifices. With yoga, I was able to see this. With the work I did with Rupta, I really saw many other things, and how this sense of guilt that unconsciously I developed with my mom would show up also in my relationship and other things. So I'm trying to now close the story. So I became very well aware with that. And now that I'm doing this project, this podcast, I'm now in a creative exploration chapter in my life. What I'm noticing is that I want to get out of the script. I'm out of the script. I want to be my own self. So right now, like, I'm not really, if you like the tech CEO entrepreneur, it doesn't touch me anymore too much. What touches me are the people who are truly authentic, like yourself, for example. And I'm like, okay, what is my work to do? What is something that has my name on it? I need to do it. Little parenthesis. I also know that, and this came out also in the Rupta work, if I don't do it, I don't know, I feel like I have this huge energy inside myself, like right here. And if I don't throw it out into the world, into doing something, that why I was in the fast-paced startup environment, I'm gonna explode somehow. That's the right word. But at the same time, I don't know where to put it in a way that truly is coherent and aligned with myself. So I'm navigating this contrast. So to go back to the question is, I feel like I've been too much in the last months, to be honest, in the inner world, working on this and other topics, and not too much in the outer world. So all of this doesn't lead to a question. It probably leads to, how do you think I should be balanced this inner world discovery, which I really dive myself into, with also go out and do something in the world? Because like this project, it's something I'm doing with the world, but somehow, I don't know, I feel like the work over here in the inner world is holding me back somehow into this or any other endeavor.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So how do I put out this energy in a productive way?
It makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of people that come to me exactly at that stage where they have kind of burnt out their ambition. So they've lived that life where they've found a company, they've worked at big tech corporates in senior positions in Silicon Valley, and they realize, now that I'm the CEO of XYZ, or even before I become the CEO of XYZ, I see how much I am attached to what other people think about me, to having a lot of friends, to having an amazing girlfriend or wife, to the display of what they're building. And they often go deep down into the spiritual path. And especially if they don't find someone like Rupta, whom I think holds together the ability to be spiritual and to be extremely intelligent and present and true to herself. They go deep into the spiritual path, and they learn about detachment, which I think is, in that moment, is for them the medicine, right? Because they're so attached to reality, because they're like, if I work 1 more hour, I will fundraise more and at better conditions for my startup. If I work 1 more hour, I will sell more and I will have more revenues. If I work 1 more hour, whatever is the thing that they are striving for. So there is this deep attachment to the outer world that is burning them out. And or even just, if I show up to another work event, then I'm going to have more connections, or I'm going to have better friends, and then I'm going to go to that event where I can, meet better people, and next year I'll have a better holiday, and so on. And I think that the detachment, the story about detachment, the liberation from this need to do and to manipulate reality, is obviously extremely safe and powerful for them, because it's like, all of a sudden I don't depend on that anymore. Like, you can really see physically how they are. Often they have, like, I always tell them, they do like this or move their legs while they're talking to me, and then the transition is into a space where their body is relaxed. And sometimes the detachment, the dissociation from the outer world goes too far on the other side. I'm not saying this is your case, and it's not that something happens, but at the same time, it's not a balance anymore, because, as you say, it's not being, moving forward both in the outer and in the inner world, but it's this detachment that gives them safety, gives them, especially if they were close to burnout, however we define it, it gives them the ability to rest and to restore their system. But at the same time, it doesn't bring them into reality. And so I can't compete, I can't win, so I give up the race. That's the paradigm. And when I give up the race, I don't give a shit anymore. And I'm probably going to say that the race was actually not that relevant because I've given up on it. But at the same time, then I float into this detachment where I am peaceful, especially when yoga, meditation, and those practices come in. And I realized that I could actually stay without a job because I've made enough money, which was obvious on everyone else's mind, but not in my mind, and so on. But I'm also lost. Like, I'm just floating into a space where there's no boundaries, there's no island, there is no way for me to interact with the world and have an exchange with the world.
Yeah, this is a good recap of what I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
With the difference that, I mean, these people, they are giving up the race, but they won the race somehow. In my case, I don't think like I was
Everyone says that.
way more junior, but
Everyone comes to me and says, yes, but you're talking about CEOs, you're talking about successful people, whatever. They all look successful from the outside, as much as you look successful to someone who's younger than you, or
Yeah, no, of
someone
course.
to someone who didn't work in a company like Anpal. It's like we all prove ourselves something, and it doesn't matter whether you've reached the CEO or whether you've reached a senior position or whether you've reached leading the expansion into a new market for a big company. It's internal, the KPI.
Yeah, in that case, it's true.
So it's absolutely the same for you, because they will never say that they've proven themselves, because they're also looking up. As much as I have people that literally didn't build a company. So there is a full spectrum.
And just to add you a piece of information, the detachment is very, very true. So I think I've been too much in the yang, you know, and now I went just the yin, just the being, the contemplation, and like literally when I quit my job at Empal in Halloween, I mean, I did a few things that I really wanted to do, very practical. But then my days before starting the podcast was really like the whole morning sitting on a chair meditating. It was extremely beautiful, right? When I was like crying out of happiness because I was able to do it. And if you would talk to me, I was super equanimous. I wouldn't like say I have contrast. I don't like the fact that I'm not into the war. I would be just super fine. But then after 1-2 months, I started feeling this huge energy that if it doesn't go out, it's gonna, my system doesn't work if it doesn't come out.
I know. And I think it's beautiful that you already can feel it. Because for some people, it's not that clear. So I think that the clarity helps. And my, coaches should never give advice, and they should just ask questions. I don't do that, because I think that the people I work with have very quick minds. Their lives are so high-paced. And even if they are completely into the inner world, they still have the ability to move fast. So I'm like, I don't want to drive you somewhere with my questions as if I knew where we're going. I just tell them what I hear, and then we pick it up from there. And generally, what I see is that why you're not in the outer world right now, I'm sure that there has been occasions for you to root yourself in the outer world. Like whether it was someone that told you, let's explore this startup idea, whether it was someone that told you, look, I've seen an open position here, whether it was someone that told you, let's go for a trip somewhere, and you were like, no, because whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
It's because right now you're attaching a very final and high stakes identity to what you're going to do next, right? Because right now in your mind is, I've left the path, and now I'm in the pathless path. So what I do now is Carlos.
Yeah.
It has to be good. It has to be great. It has to tick all the boxes.
It's the destiny has led me here because of
and
all
so
of
now
this.
it has to be the right thing. It cannot be a random...
To justify all of this, it has to be the right thing.
Absolutely. And I think that has something beautiful, which is the intensity, which is something I absolutely require in people I work with. But it also is very misleading, as in what you think is right now is such a limited version of reality, right? Like imagine the person you were before Halloween and what you've learned in the current 6 months. The version of the world that you had when you came in was this, and then now is this, right?
Absolutely.
And in 6 months, it could be this. So what you're right now saying no to could be something that leads you to something that then becomes your way. And I think the ability to detach from the idea that if I work with this person, even if I freelance for this company, let's say, they also want to open the Italian market, and they asked me to freelance for them, like similar to what I was doing for NPEL, but freelance for them 2 days per week. I actually do not particularly like the company, but you know what, like, why not? They work in health, and the people in the company are amazing. I don't know about the field, but it's going to give me some money, and it's a good position, even if it's freelancing and so on. And maybe once you follow the lead there, that's a space in which you realize that those are people that live and create out of certain values, and you end up having a powerful position in that company where you are all of a sudden realizing that's my inner and outer world coming together. And there was no, from the outer world, there was no possibility to expect that. And I always say, or that's just something that gives you financial freedom for the next 6 months to invest in a trip to San Francisco and meet your future co-founder. So once we detach from the idea that what I do in the next hour needs to be life-changing, but this is going to be a drop, this, whatever it is, it's going to be a drop, and no one
Everything
prevents
is a
me.
drop, yeah.
It's a drop, and no one prevents me from redefining where I'm going. One thing that is powerful to do at this stage is to define very clearly what is the container in which you want to experience your life. I have ground rules. I have 10 ground rules that I work with, and that comes from the person who coached me at the very beginning of this journey. And I've shaped them over time based on what we were learning with people. Some of them would come in and have high expectations about how they perform with coaching. So one of the ground rules is that we let go of performance KPIs. Mm-hmm. So I have ground rules, and they help me shape what is the container I work in. And why this is helpful is because if I'm focused on the container and I know the type of energy that I want to sit in when I work in that container, and I know what are the characteristics of this container and the rules that define the container, then I don't have to worry about what other people that land into my container do. Mm-hmm. And if they belong to the container they're in, if they don't belong, they're out, we will see over time. But it's very comfortable for me because I nurture and tend the container. And similarly, and this allowed me over time to say, I don't need to judge every single person I work with. There are some that are super successful. There are some that are only driven by money. There are some that are in the early stages of their career, but they have a high potential. There is some that are extremely spiritual. There's some of them that are extremely rational, purely scientific, only obsessed about the product they're building. Like, there is a variegate set of people. If I had to judge every one of them and ask myself whether my identity is to work for them or with them, I wouldn't have worked with any of them probably. But instead, the fact that I focus on the container and I just make sure that they are in the container allows me to be A, way more relaxed and hold the container very well, and B, let go of judgment about people. And I think, or about projects, right? And I think that when you define your container, which is like, okay, let me see, let's define my container for the next 6 months. These are the rules. I want to have full transparency with whoever I work with. I want to have a fair exchange of money for value. I want to have no judgment and permission to speak up. I want to have clearing. Clearing is one of my ground rules, and it's related to the ability to bring on the table anything that is lying behind the conversation. And it's it's very easy to understand, very hard to implement until you implement it. So it's the feeling of when you're in a relationship and there is that friction where you're like, my co-founder is working less than I am working, but I love him, so I can't see this coming until at some point I explode and I didn't see it coming. And
only then you realize, yeah.
And only then I realize that. Or my partner
because
is not...
there are things that, you don't want to see, that you don't pay attention to them.
Absolutely. And as entrepreneurs, but I think now you're in the inner world, so you have time. But if you think about when you were in the outer world, there's no time, or you choose to not have time.
We choose not to have time,
create that depth, right? And so the clearing is the ability to say there is something which doesn't feel right in this conversation. Also, could be a friend, could be an investor, could be your partner. And I take the time and the effort to understand what is there and to clear the ground. And clearing happens, first of all, between me and the other person. And sometimes it happens. And it's like in the form of, I feel like you're not fully present during our sessions on both sides. Or in the form of, I was expecting us to meet in person and we didn't make it happen. It's no one's fault, but I want to clear the ground about that. And so it's beautiful to define your container. And I can easily imagine you defining a beautiful container where you can put in anything, right? Like if you want to have depth in the conversations you have, regardless of whether that's a work conversation or it's a fun conversation, whether that gives you money or not. I want to have depth. I want to have powerful conversations. And then I want to put myself continuously into a challenging environment. You define your container and then it becomes easier to say yes or no because you walk in the world very clearly with that container. And so it's easier for people to tag along and to say, actually, like, Carlos' container is great. Like, there is so much there that makes sense. There is so much there that is leading me in a direction that I can relate to or that I feel fascinated from. And then what this allows you to do is to start being in the outer world. And is there a freelance project that actually does fall into your container nicely and is just 10 hours per week? Amazing. I start a freelance project and I see where this leads me. Is there...
define the rule of your game and play by the rule of your game. Yeah, I really like it that you define the container, so the rules that are important to you, and then you see if the things in front of you match that. Because normally I think that what I do and what most people do is defining some possible vehicles. So
what do you mean with vehicle?
Go back to a startup, fast-paced job. Focus on the podcast and double down on that. Do this other thing. So very specific, like job description.
Yeah.
And then you start saying, yes, but this over here has this pro, but it's missing this that I have on the other side. And vice versa, while I like to have a container, and then does it fit the container or it doesn't fit? And then basically you say yes to what fits the container.
Yes. And I think, you've interviewed people in the podcast that have worked with me. And what I love about looking back at people's journeys is exactly noticing that when they were able to define the container and let go of what's the title going to be, that allowed them to step into a place where they had the full knowledge of who they are, and then things could start happening outside of what they could imagine. I shared with you that I have that project that started yesterday from a client who asked me to work with a group of people in a remote island in Finland. And I could have never imagined that. Also, the target of people, I think, is going to be quite different from the target of people I work with. It's going to be like, let's say, older leaders, potentially. I love that the world has put me in front of that because it fits my container. I'm going to define the rules of that. We're going to bring together being in the wilderness and, taking risks as a leader and the radical self-inquiry that they want to implement in themselves, from elements of strategy to elements of how they show up in their families. But the fact that we can do that in nature and the fact that the rules are defined belonging to my container allows me to say yes to something that has never even been in my mindset. And I think that it's important to take that step back from the self-judgment and commit to the container, so that the container is really what we identify with. And then the container will be, it's like a mosaic that is made. I mean, I've given you earlier my idea for my painting with my clients, right? It's what opens up is that it's a mosaic of 1,000 different pieces. And so if the piece that comes in tomorrow, which is a collaboration with someone in Berlin, or one of my founders in San Francisco that needs an expansion to Europe and wants to have a conversation with you, this is actually a real case that I've just mentioned. So maybe that's a concrete thing that could happen. You know, whether it's a total fit or not, you're like, it's going to be a mini piece. You know, I always say this, once you zoom out from the intensity of this instant, you're going to work for another 40 years, likely. Whether it's going to be work, whether it's not going to feel like work, but you're going to be engaged with this reality. I never want to retire, so I hope I'm going to work for the next several years.
I want to play for the next, yeah.
And once you look at it from that perspective, it's like 10 hours per week for 6 months is really a drop. If that drop is in alignment, but is not, you know, yet the definition of Carlos that I have in mind, it might bring me to a definition of Carlos that is much better than the one I originally had in mind. When I start working with people, one of the agreements we have is that we will not have goals for the coaching. If they want to have goals, I tell them we agree that we will need to change them over time. Because again, when you start coaching, this is the version of reality you're aware of. And so these are the goals you can envision. Making this amount of money, raising this amount of money, reaching that position, or even deeper goals about ourselves, having more self-confidence or being more empathetic with people, not burning out your employees, understanding what to do next with your job. But then we open that up over time and the goals become radically different. And so the ability to let ourselves exponentially grow as leaders and as individuals is what allows us to have a goal that in the end we can't actually see today, because it's like we look at reality linearly and we're like, that's where I want to land. And then we grow exponentially. But we grow exponentially only if we have the mindset of actually landing somewhere else. Otherwise, we're probably going to land somewhere which is way less powerful because we kept those blindings and that linear mindset.
And one question about the container, can it be that maybe the container but the container just values, right? Because the question I was about to ask is, can it be that the container has too many bullet points that is too much limited?
What are the characteristics of your container that comes to mind right now? It's not going to be definitive.
Okay, what comes to mind right now?
Yeah, very intuitively.
So, one thing that I don't want to trade is freedom. So, the example that I gave you, like being here at 3 p.m. So, organizing your work to be here at 3 p.m. for me is very beautiful. So, this is one thing. Good exchange of value for money, of course. 3, honesty, for me, is very, very important, and clearing also, 100%. Number 4, for the next container, for me, but I don't know if this is a value, but okay, I'm gonna just drop it, is what I told you before in the elevator. Like, I wanna work with a little team. So there must be the team component, because I feel like I'm a team player. I hate like just working on my own. 5 for me is very important. This is more about relationally with this person. I don't know if it's a value of the container, but it comes to my mind. It's very, like, I feel I can express myself when I feel my power when I'm either, these things are very opposite. Like, when I can have deep conversation with the people, like I'm really listening, and the people normally is something that have been telling me feel very safe with me, and they easily open up. And I've been able to, I don't know if provide value or just listening or mirroring them something back that allows them to liberate something about themselves, I would say. So some aha moment. But second, for me, is also very normally one-to-one. And second, for me, like I feel like strong and very alive on the other opposite. So when I'm in a group of people and I'm just super playful and silly and joking with them and motivating people, but like in a very silly way. And then number 6, now I have a judgment. Maybe this is too much. It came with the number 6 is we are all very aligned on one goal and we are going there together. Mm-hmm. I got the image of, Odysseus. Mm-hmm. We're going there, we're going to sail in that direction and we're going to have fun doing that. Mm-hmm. And then, now maybe I'm going into another direction, but I was thinking about some moments in my career which I really loved and felt power and aliveness when I was like pitching something or like doing little commercial with NPAL. So I don't know, I like this thing on action, showtime. Mm-hmm. So I would like to have that in the next container. So these are the 7 bullet points that came in my mind.
Okay. So I think you can divide them roughly in 2 categories. One of them I think is where I would put honesty. You didn't say it, but I would put also integrity.
Yeah, of course.
Clearing and freedom. And probably also the element of going all together in one direction. Mm-hmm. So these are elements that you commit to individually, and is in this sense it's really in your hands. Like your container could be very easily have these as foundations where you can quite intuitively say this person is in or out, because you have the ability to see that those, if someone is not having a clearing conversation with you, you're going to create that clearing conversation. Yeah. If someone tells you, you work for me in this position, and you're like, fine, but I'll work very hard. I'll bring 100% of my intensity and value, but I might want to take some free mornings during the week randomly. And this will be compensated. Like I will work by outcomes, not by time, and I will deliver more than what you expect, or I will deliver exactly what I commit to, but in my own timing. Then you guide the conversation. Obviously, it is the same when you are an entrepreneur. It's a trap where you can fall into, the one where you think that you have to fill up your time with deliverables. So I think that maybe it's good to introduce now the concept of the drama triangle, which I don't think we talked about when we spoke, or did we?
No.
Do you know about it?
I know about it. I spoke about this with a couple of people, and I definitely identify with the hero. 100%.
Because I think that whenever we have the fear of stepping into the outer world and not being aligned with ourselves anymore, people that are in that trajectory of high ambition, high achieving, high attachment, realizing that is not helpful, that is potentially making me successful or not, whether you realize it because you're not succeeding as much as you wanted, or because you succeed and you're like, that wasn't such a big deal, then you get into the detachment. So you go deep into your inner journey, and then at some point you're like, wow, equanimity is great, but it's also really silent, really boring down here. Like the energy is exploding. Then there is this process where you want to interact with the outer world again, but there is something that holds you back, which is the fear of, I'm going to go back there. And especially for people that have strong entrepreneurial mindset, if they back there were hired, so they were employees, then there is the fear of your freedom being reduced, of your power of creating, of your power of the showtime and so on. And that is to me a victim, because that is not believing that you can, and with victim I mean the victim from the drama triangle, just because not everyone knows about it, which is simply a mindset of looking at my reality from the perspective of someone who's prosecuted by someone else and who needs to be rescued. And in this case, I'm prosecuted by the system, because the system wants to put me back into not having freedom, into not having integrity, into lack of honesty. And what saves me is my inner world work. The truth is, you can become from a victim a creator. And when you do that, you create your reality. You create that container, and through the container, you create a setup that allows you to interact with the outer world in a certain way. And I say this having been a great victim. I am the queen of victims. My partner is the queen of rescuers. We're a great match. And it was great to find out that that's not the way to go. But the moment in which I personally, or continuously with my clients, and some of my clients tell me, don't you tell me again that I'm being a victim. And then I'm just like silent. There's nothing else I can say right now. But it's, once we say, okay, great, like that is up to me to create that. It doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, I'm going to create it. If it doesn't, and you'll see I'm sure you already have, there are many other people that want to work according to those values and to those setups and to those definitions of reality. And so once you commit to creating that, once you commit to stepping out of the victim, that intrinsically it's not, I know that you're not complaining about it, but I can see that the underlying assumption is, I'm not sure it's outside there.
Yeah, it's true. Like in the past, I would say I would identify as the hero, at least I think. But in this situation, true, is the victim. Mm-hmm. Because whenever I have in front of me, I say, but that might lead to this thing which I don't want.
You're assuming that you're at the end of the triangle, as in the world is up here and is dominating you. The world of, but if I become a founder, I have the freedom, but I may not be able to fundraise because they won't recognize the value that I hold. And if I go into a company, they will not have my same values, and so on and so forth. And the truth is, it's up to us to create the things that you named in your container in the category of integrity, honesty, freedom, alignment with the rest of the team. They are all up to you. They're all something that you commit to, you put in practice in every one of your relationships. And I always say that's why I say that coaching is a gym, because we create that first in our relationship and you experience it. So from a neuroscience perspective, your brain gets used to that, gets used to an extreme clearing, gets used to an extreme lack of transactionality. I have a very particular money conversation, because one of the most important things for me is that people experience how does it feel to have an exchange of money for value out of usual transactional ways. And so your brain goes through that experience, processes that, and then is able to recreate it with your partner, with your friends, with the company with which you freelance, with a potential co-founder. And so you start to move in that container and you start to be better at creating that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything you build is built through those things, and it will lead to something that is coherent to that. Mm-hmm. The relationship that will be born with people by following those principles will bring other people that match. So it's an upward spiral.
And the second category, which was working in a team and being on stage, so having the potential to create.
Which in the past, I think I judged, because I'm like, subconsciously, Carlos, don't be eccentric, but I cannot deny it somatically that I do like that.
That you like being on stage. Yeah, sure. I had a conversation 2 weeks ago with a client who asked me whether I wanted to be on stage for a very large event they're organizing for VCs. And I was like, yeah, sure. I love being on stage. Like, I absolutely love. And she was like, can you please teach me? And I was like, we can play around with that, but I think it's physical. I also love being on stage, so I can understand that. When it comes to teams, I think that is a limit that you don't need. As in, so it's also a very good example. When we talk about needs, we tend to talk about processed needs instead of unprocessed needs. This is something I've made up because I was just observing all the time people doing the same thing. One example is I have a client who we once had an episode where she told me I need my partner to, she had an argument with her partner because he was not spending dinner with her and some of her friends. And I said, and she said to her partner, I need you to be here for dinner today. And for him, that was a huge limitation of his freedom. And so that's a process need. The idea that I need you to be here for dinner today with my friends. Mm-hmm. What I asked her is, what is the unprocessed need? The unprocessed need is, I need you to have intimacy with my friends and family, with my intimate people. Doesn't need to be today. Doesn't need to be these friends. Doesn't need to be through a dinner. What I need is that connection. And if we are able, whenever we have a process need we are attached to, that might be limiting when we want to create something new. Because we attach to that element instead of understanding what is it. We might also be wrong because
it's an impulse.
It's an impulse because that's how we've always responded to that unprocessed need. But through the work, what we realize is when I hear people that come to me and they say, I should or I need, those are always things that I want to unpack. And I'm like, what has happened in your past that leads you today to say I should? And what has happened in your past that leads you today I need? And what is the unprocessed need behind that we can connect to so that you find a powerful answer to that which may not go through the team? Because I could totally see you hosting an incredible Carlitos show that is going to be financially sustainable. It's going to allow you to have powerful conversations. It's going to allow you to have your freedom. It's going to allow you to have that clarity. And at the same time, you're not with the team explicitly, but you sit down with amazing people. You have freelancers that work with you to set up even better lights and scene and whatever, that do ex post editing work. So the unprocessed need, I think, for this is the sense of adventure with other people. Because the image was like the Odysseus and people on the boat sailing. Mm-hmm. So that sense of adventure on a day-to-day basics. And it did came out of an impulse. So when I started doing this, I'm like, it's fine if I'm doing this alone, no problem at all. And then it's as an impulse, I hate doing these things on my own. Then I need to, the impulse is like, go into a startup because again, you're in a environment with other people and you have that sense of adventure. So it can be that it was an impulse, and the unprocessed need is just that sense of having an adventure with other people. Mm-hmm. Which, might be a need to which you give a response differently. It could be that you are the host of Carlitos' show, financially successful, intellectually powerful for you and for other people, high impact, and that you, with the hosts, with your community from the podcast, go on adventures with people, organize retreat with them, or organize a platform where you match people from the community that want to meet for work-related reasons, like whatever. But I think that once you identify the unprocessed need, you learn how to deal with that in different ways that are not necessarily the one that you know, because there are so many more. And I think in that case, you know, ways to embark in adventures with people could even be that you choose to get married and have kids, an incredible adventure with someone. Or that you choose to experience, you know, moving to a new city and building new connections with people there. I think it's, once we know the unprocessed need, becomes almost irrelevant to give it an answer in terms of outer world, but it becomes more intuitive. I have a founder who tells me very often he's missing a girlfriend. He doesn't have a girlfriend right now, and he wants to build a family. And we learned over time that what he needs is actually intimacy with people, because he's only working 12 hours per day and going to the gym and going to work-related events in San Francisco where his family is not. And how to build intimacy has become straightforward for him after we named it. Many times I say, how I do coaching is a bit like, in my mind, is a bit like acupuncture, as in people come to me with the problem, which is my hand hurts, which is very outer world related. We learn together where that is rooted. It's like something in the shoulder. So my problem is I don't have a girlfriend. Related to intimacy, I don't have enough intimacy in my life. Once we put the pin there, there's nothing else that we need to do. Like, literally, we put the needle, we put the pin on intimacy, the concept, and that thing unfolds in the outer world in many different ways. There's cases where there is trauma therapy is needed, but that's out of the conversation. But the vast majority of people I work with, we name it, and that's enough for them to then go into the world and come back and tell me, I met this person at a work-related event, and it's an investor, and you know, we created an amazing relationship, and intimacy in my life is coming from that. So unexpected. But then I think then it's really the intuition that you can trust in people once you identify the unprocessed need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the way to navigate all of this, to process your unprocessed needs, being aware that you might play the role of the hero, the rescuer, or the victim, and then fix yourself. You think that the most effective way is through coaching? I mean, you might have a bias.
That's a very good question. I absolutely have a bias. I think there are many ways. You know, inner work can be done reading books, having retreats, even just by mentally committing to certain things. What I personally find powerful is have someone who is external and who accelerates that. Mm-hmm. You know, most of the times I could, like, when people that support me in my growth tell me this is what I'm hearing, I'm like, yeah, obvious. Like, how did I not see that? And yet I could not see it for the next 3 months.
Yeah, it's a hell of an accelerator.
So the acceleration that happens when you work with someone is quite powerful. And I think another person can in a much more efficient way create a container for you that really puts you into a different reality that you were not experiencing before. And the fact that you go through that experience, that you receive that attention, that love, that wind of creativity, of vision, that non-transactional relationship is something that it's like when you go on a holiday in nature and you come back and you feel like physically different. You show up at work the first day and you're like, I'm physically different, even just because I changed my geography for a few days. And that happens like exponentially in coaching or in whenever you work. It doesn't need to be called coaching. I don't even know how to call it myself when I do it. But whenever you work with someone that holds such a clear container where you can have that experience. That's why I love to work in nature with founders, because when you associate the container that we are talking about right now with the the physical experience into an environment which is potentially extreme, even though it doesn't need to be a glacier like I've done for a long time, but it can also just be the cliffs outside of San Francisco. It is something that really brings you out of your reality and brings you into something else that is something that you want to bring in your life. And the brain gets used to it. Like the brain gets used to, this is how the world could look like. So let me bring this into my other conversations and see if I can expand this. You know, when people like go to a retreat or experiences where they come back and it's like, wow, this was amazing. How? But now there is sort of, how do I integrate this with my real life? That's exactly what coaching does. So I'm always very happy when people come to me and they've done therapy, they've done ayahuasca, they've worked with other coaches, they've done a lot of things. And what we do is, how do we integrate that so that way of being becomes your reality? So I think that the ways to do this are really infinite. And I know people that do this in several companies. I've just recently met a person in San Francisco in a big company where he works with entrepreneurs exactly in that way, even though it's not called coaching. And to see how the elements of extreme wild nature, a container which is clear, and the willingness to go deep, that intensity, how they work, I think it can be in different setups. What I always say is, it's a matter of finding someone that can hold the container well and that can go deep enough, that has the humility to know that they will not know it all, and the commitment of continuously showing up with the best version of themselves. And then it becomes it becomes easier for you to do the same.
Yeah, true. And holding the container well means being able to define clearly what is your container.
And to respect it over time, and to have it respected, and to be able to spot. I have had recently a situation with a client where I said, he walked out of the container. We had some agreements, and in that case was an agreement related to permission and resistance. Like, everyone is resisting coaching. Because sometimes you hear, let's do this. I wanted to ask you something. So people can see resistance in real life. So you're gonna see Julio, who's a friend, in the next couple of days. And I was thinking while we were speaking, I could see you setting up a project with Julio of some type of consultant. So Julio is currently, I could be wrong, I don't want to describe what he's doing, but he's consulting some companies. He will tell you more. And I could see you playing a role in that project. He's worked in the space of sustainability. He's working at the intersection with climate, with scale-ups. So I could easily see you sort of plugging in some of his projects with some of these scale-ups and, bringing in your experience from NPAL there. And then when I was thinking about that, I think something would hold you back. I think you will not enter the conversation with him with the mindset of, I could collaborate with him. How does this image feel for you, and what would hold you back from that?
Definitely true. I mean, the fact that you told me you're playing the victim, it really opened up. I mean, I'm noticing in every 3 sentences that you, in every reference you do about what I could do, I see this now. I didn't see it before, but it's true that in the last months I would put myself in the corner because let me go there, no about that. Let me go there, no about that. And so I'm going to be completely honest and very straightforward. So without thinking, what would hold me back is not seeing everything as drop of water that will go into the river together. It's I don't know why this metaphor, but I would see things as separate dishes and I have to pick one. So this would hold me back. And again, the fact that does this lead me into the way or out of my way, when actually every step is a step of the way. So these are two things. So I do feel a lot of excitement because one, I see let's go back to the outer world. This is the excitement. Second, because of who is Giulio and the fact that you introduced me to him makes me say, okay, cool person. But what is holding me back is, yeah, but if I do this, then I won't push too much in the Carlitos show. And so this overthinking about if I go into this option, I lose this other option. This overthinking is what's holding me back. So this is the recap. The overthinking about the other ways is the thing that's holding me back.
Okay. And I think there is something else there, which is that you actually don't believe that you are worth doing a project with Julio. That you actually believe Julio is an experienced person and I am not.
I feel a little bit of, maybe you took some extra steps of what I was about to think, which was soggezione. Maybe it means the same, so I wouldn't say like I'm not worth of that, but I would see myself as he's a very, very big guy and I'm a smaller guy. So can I play with him? Which maybe it's another word to say the same thing.
Absolutely. So resistance would be when I say this to be like, yes. But I think mostly the drop. Like sort of, I've given you a perspective which you did not mention at all. You were going in a very different direction. And you don't want to hear that.
And this is the power of working with a coach. Yeah.
This is the power of someone that sees something which you maybe see it immediately, which is amazing, or you resist. And you're like, yes, but. The yes, but. When I hear the yes, but, I'm always like, okay, that's resistance. Or the yes, but then you double down on what you just said. And it's like that part, which is, I mean, it's quite strong. Like I've told you something quite big, which was really not in the line of the conversation that we've had so far. And this is because, in that sense, I love that you said soggezione, because I think it includes the verticality of the victim. Like he is up here and I am down here.
Soggezione is something I have to deep dive to understand, which I haven't. I'm not struggling too much. Like I see that with some people that I used to have soggezione, I don't feel it anymore.
Shall we define it as being intimidated?
A little bit. So, like when we were having the coffee, you could feel that I was, even now, a little bit. I mean, I would say I'm quite relaxed, but there is, this movement, which I'm, relaxing, of intimidation with you because of this verticality, which is done through respect, right? Of the fact that also a comparison. So I see you are super ahead in the journey. You represent something that I admire. And I don't know why I take these things, which are fine and beautiful, and I create this verticality, which often happen in my past with bosses or...
I think there is an inner gap related to, I think it's how you define it is very beautiful. You take something which is positive, which is recognizing in someone else something I like, and instead of being able to put myself horizontally in a relationship with that person, where I don't judge us based on how much do we have or X, Y, Z, but I judge us in terms of how we can interact. And so we sit eye to eye, at eye level. And it's one of my agreements, that I sit with my clients eye level, because there is no guru. I
Yeah.
have so much I am and will have to work on. And they always say, yeah, I want to agree on this, but honestly, it doesn't feel this way. Like, you know, you've worked with so many people, you have that much experience, whatever. And over time, they understand how true that is, because I come in the conversation with a lot of personal stuff as well. And the reason why I do it is because I believe that the sooner we are able to end the vertical hierarchy in our mind with people, the more we are going to have relationships that can be powerful, right? Because yes, you are intimidated, but there is also a part of you that is conscious of that and is allowing yourself to relax, and hence to come across with good questions, or hence to come across with the truth about what you're experiencing. And in a conversation like the one with Julio, you being able to not be in a vertical relationship with someone, but horizontal relationship with him, can actually allow you to deliver all of the value that you can deliver there. And it's very fun when I meet people today. It's not always been that way, but when I meet people today, I tend to meet everyone eye to eye. And not because, I think also because there is a part of me that thinks very highly of me and has roots in arrogance, but mostly because I think there is, you know, there will always be something that I know better than them, even if I meet the Dalai Lama and I can cook Italian food better, or there will be something that they know better than me. Like if I'm talking to someone who's 15, they surely are super deep into some hobby that they have that I know nothing about. Or they have something like an ability, an empathy that I do not have, for example. And so I love it, because when I meet people, I see that they immediately, the way they react with me is that they try to understand whether they are up here or here with respect to me. You know, when I meet them for the first time, like at conferences. So it's like, you know, okay, money-wise, am I making, or do I have more money? Like, where do I stand in the money KPI with respect to you? Role-wise, experience-wise, connections-wise. And what I do, a bit unconsciously, a bit as a game, is if they try to put themselves here, then I brag about stuff. And so they are intimidated and they go down here. And then I meet them down here. And they're like so confused because they have that vertical hierarchy. And over time, they understand that that horizontal relationship is what allows both of us. And it's, for some of them, it's scary because they're like, you're my coach. You're not supposed to tell me that, you know, you didn't realize this about me and you now need to grow on this topic. And I'm like, me being able to do that allows you to always be eye level with people, which doesn't imply arrogance, but implies that if there is some value I can deliver here, I'm going to deliver that. And I think I'm happy we're having this conversation before you talk to Julio, because I would love for you to experience the conversation with him from the perspective of who's Carlos that is not held back by the vertical hierarchy mindset, and how does horizontal relationships Carlos operate? You know, how does he interact in this conversation? How does he share about what he knows or doesn't know, so that if there is something in the outer world that can be created, it does happen?
No, it's well, thank you for highlighting this and making me realize about this image, and for this suggestion. But no, it's true. I think, I don't know how, but I think I did a lot of work already on this. So if we would have met like 3 years ago, because of this verticality, my reaction would have been, you need to impress her somehow with great question, etc. And this wouldn't have allowed me to have a good conversation, or I would have had a mediocre conversation. So the boxes that I have to checks, but there wouldn't have been this deepness.
Absolutely.
So I don't know how, but I think I already did this works, because this thing, maybe you would challenge this, I don't know.
No,
but I think I removed it.
I can see that is very, I mean, I think we wouldn't sit here otherwise. You know, I think you started a podcast very recently and you're not a voice in the space, but I think because you're able to have very authentic conversations, because ultimately you're like, I want to interview you guys because you're amazing, but I can create a powerful conversation with you. So there is an element of sitting eye to eye with people. And I think where I would challenge you is, which is also, that's perfect. There is a part of you that is already able to create that horizontal relationship when it comes to the inner world. I know you look at me vertically, but you're also like, there's not a lot of people that have done the work that you have done in your space and at your age in the inner world. So you're like, I know that I know my shit there. But how does version of Carlos apply to Carlos in the outer world? Carlos that does a work related topic, whether we want to define that as work. So
very true.
You know, you already own. That's an ability you have.
That is very true, because the conversation are authentic normally with the people I'm talking with when we are in the inner world. But yeah, it's missing in the outer world. Yeah.
Which is also related to what you said earlier in terms of your requirements for your container, or wasn't a requirement, it was like the realization of how you can interact with people and give them something when it comes to the inner world, friends and people around you, which I think is exactly that. You've given yourself permission to be that person when it comes to the inner world. How would it be if that's also you when it comes to a freelance consulting for scale-ups or founding your famous company?
Allowing myself to be that person.
The best way to look at this is connect to how you feel when you are sitting eye to eye with someone in the inner world, or when you're guiding someone in the inner world, when you have those conversations where people tell you, that was amazing, like you helped me navigate something. So that feeling, that state of your brain is what you want to do, because you meditate, is what you want to
have also in the outer world.
Identify, yeah. And the more, it's like the more you know it, the more you're able to tap into that, the more you can bring it into a conversation about a project, a conversation about a company you want to create.
Which doesn't necessarily mean you have to go through the inner world to go in the outer world. You somehow, I don't know how to visualize, but you take that energy and you put it in the outer world.
And it's literally, most of it is the permission to transcend hierarchies, to transcend experience, to transcend social convention, and say, let me be the most intuitive version of myself and let me see if I can create value here. So if Julio is telling me, I have this client with whom I'm working on XYZ, the world that comes in that says, well, Julio has built 2 companies, he has like 20 years of experience in the market, he knows what he's doing. I'm not going to tell him he could do this. He probably already knows. That's the story, right?
Or more but if I go with Julio, then I cannot, I will work less on the podcast, and then this other door closes, but just be there and use that intuition.
And be like, look, I think there is, maybe you already know about this, but when I was at Empel, I had this experience, that's what I learned, that might be useful. So I'm serving you right now, and I don't do it with the purpose of, I do it because I allow myself to do it. You might already know, but that's breaking the verticality, taking away all the assumptions. Let's keep for a second the fear of not having time anymore, that the fear of then this becomes my only project. But let's literally just talk about the verticality.
Okay,
and the fear
true. I was going to the other thing.
And the fear of what happens if, we're not staying on the same level. And you in that moment being able to clear your mind from all the stories of I don't dare telling him XYZ could be a gift for Julio, and him realizing, hey man, actually I think it would be so useful for me to, have a couple of more conversations with you about this project because you might help. Maybe I also bring you to the client. And you're like, well, it's going to be 10 hours overall, like 10 hours in a lifetime. It's going to be paid. I think it could be also fun. I would love to learn how Julio works. Let's do it. And then you see that, something else happens, but the root of that is you being the version of Carlos in the inner world where you are willing to serve others because you give yourself that authority, and noticing that you can be that person also when it comes to work-related topics. With the honesty that is your container of saying, well, about this, I actually don't know nothing. Like, honestly, this is a topic that never landed on my table. Whereas about that, I know a lot. And, this is the process of transcending hierarchies, conventional, years of experience, seniority, and so on, is so needed. Because if you do inner work while you're building a company, the experience, the hard and soft skills you develop are like 10x than if you do it using your productivity plan and filling up your calendar and never giving depth to that.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have in 2 years 10x the experience of someone that has worked 5 years. So the more we transcend that and the more we go straight to the topic. So all the social conventions around whether I am supposed to tell you something are gone. I'm on the product. Imagine for people that work in product or people that work in companies, this is very easy to understand. I'm like, imagine someone that has no structure, but they are only motivated by, you want to build a chair with your company and you hire someone and this person comes in, they don't give a shit about anything. They just want to build a chair. And they are committed 100% on the chair. They don't talk about career progression. They don't talk about company politics. They don't talk about whether they are treated well or not. They just want to build a chair. How much would you like that? And they tell me, that would be the best ever. And I'm like, then why don't you do it yourself? Like, why don't you approach these conversations without all those filters of, but I'm not paid for this, or I'm not old enough, or I actually never did it before, or this is too low level for me. Like all of the things that come into our mind when we're approaching a task, and just go for a task. And then when you do that from a place of, I really want to serve you, and that's everything I want to do, then that can create a lot. And if that is not your way, then, I've served you and our conversation finishes here. Or I've served you, this is
but yet I showed up in the best way and I allowed myself
to be that person.
Wow. This has been a great discovery. That is true. Whenever I allow myself, whenever we are in the inner world, I don't even think about verticality, horizontality, because everything works and we are on the same level. While in the outer world, sometimes this comes where I should just allow myself. And the just allowing yourself is a mental commitment. Of course it is. Plus, does it require to understand where it comes from, or no? It's just a mental commitment that you will do your best to, whenever the trigger comes, like, fuck it. And by the trigger, it's like, oh, I'm too young, or I don't have enough experience.
I think some people are really interested in understanding where some of their behaviors come from. It helps them understand the behavior itself. Other people are way more action oriented. So they're like, maybe it's just a social convention that I've always assumed. Because you named authority, it's once we start to distinguish who we are giving authority to in our lives, and whether this is attached to knowledge or whether this is attached to function, especially when I work with companies. What we do, one of the first things that we do, if it's a larger company, is how much of your structured of your hierarchy is based on function instead of based on real knowledge. Because whenever you have functions, hierarchies based on functions, so titles, where you are a C-level, I am a trainee, but you know much, I as a trainee know much more than you, that's where you have an authority misalignment, right? And this is true in companies, but it's also true within ourselves. So when am I giving authority to a person because on paper they have this and that, voice on their CV that is making me giving them authority? And
Beautiful question, yeah.
And when instead can I give authority in the right way? Because when we do it with others, then we can do it with ourselves as well. And then, the authority is not anymore about whether I have already built a company. You know what you told me at the beginning when you said, yes, but those people have actually succeeded. That's you looking at authority as a badge, right? As you've been the CEO of a company, even if it fails. But that's you giving authority to the CEO title.
True.
And then when you give authority actually related to knowledge or intrinsic experience of people, then you can do it also with yourself.
Because that is what matters, not the badge. It's the intrinsic experience.
That's what I think. I always say, I'm not a certified coach. And there's been a person that told me, I wouldn't work with you if you were certified, because I've met so many randomly certified coaches. And I'm like, I don't want certificates to prove whether I am good at what I do. And obviously, I'm lucky because I can do it, but ultimately...
Because you can... Because
Because I think I don't like authority per se. And so it has been easy for me. That was my like beginner's luck. It's been easy for me to say, I'm just going to do this. And if people like it, they're going to send me other people. And that's how all of this built out. And obviously it's a gift to be able to work that way. But I think that once we're able to connect to, I step out of whether I have outer world authority and I just double down on serving someone. And if there is value that I deliver, they're just going to, people around them see the transformation and they want to expose themselves to the transformation as easy as it is.
In your case, was like this also in the beginning when you started the coaching?
Yeah, I started coaching when I left venture capital. And speaking of defining the container, I didn't know that back by then. But what was clear for me was that I wanted to live out of transactionality for me. And I wanted to be in integrity. Like I couldn't stand anymore some aspects. And I now smile because I see that I was cooperating to create that reality that I didn't like. That's a very relevant question that I often ask founders.
Can you say that again?
I was conjuring and cooperating to create a reality that I didn't like, right? Like today, I could be a great victim when I talk about the VC space and be like, it lacks integrity, the relationship between investors and founders is really unfair, and there is a power dynamic that doesn't reflect real knowledge or real experience, and there is lack of transparency and so on. And then I realized I was somehow feeding that myself. So there were ways I was acting and behaving that actually contributed to create the reality that I was despising and disliking. And that's something I often ask to people, when I hear people that tell me I work too much, or I struggle fundraising, or everything is amazing, but my co-founder is a problem. I'm like, how, and it's so hard to see, but how are you unconsciously cooperating to create that reality? Which is like, if you had asked me back by then, I would have said, no way, like I'm not doing anything. Like it's hard to fundraise for a fund, and everyone lacks transparency and so on. Now I can see I was playing a role in that. And when I had been able to say, I felt like I had reached the cherry on top of my career by investing in a fund that had a climate impact, that was led mainly by women, where I had coverage of Europe alone, so a lot of responsibility, and I was exposed to very smart and highly skilled people, all scientists. And it was extremely hard for me to realize maybe this which I had projected being the cherry on top of my career actually isn't. And, the power that I have right now, the leadership that I have right now, is not something that actually is giving me anything. And when I decided to let go of that, I didn't have anything in mind. I just took the leap, and I knew I had run away for several years I said I want to be out of a transactional job for 5 years. And then a person that I had met previously reached out, saying that she transitioned from the company she was working with, wanted to build her own thing, and she wanted me to mentor her. And I was like, what does that even mean? But I said yes. And back to the it's not that I thought that's what I'm going to do my entire life, or that's the one person I want to work with forever, or let's call it coaching, or let's do something. I was like, the Surrender Experiment from Carlo.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet. I heard you mention it in the other podcast.
It's, I think, the moment in which we're able to surrender, and it's back to the container, right? When my container is clear, it's easy for me to say yes to something that comes in the container, and to show up for that, even though I don't know where that is going. And I think the way I see it is really, something comes in and it's quite random maybe, but the container is so clear and so bulletproof that what goes out is always amazing.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
As long as the container is respected, right?
And as you are honest, because that's one of the pillars of the container, you're also able to update the container whenever you update, also as a person, right?
Absolutely. The container does change over time, and sometimes I fail. Like I've just had this client recently where I realized something was dragging me down in the conversations with this client. And I tend to be, or one of the most important elements of coaching is, for me, when there is a contraction in your experience of reality, either because it's a financial contraction, either because you have limiting beliefs about yourself, or even just because you realize, there is more I can achieve, I deserve more, I can do more, I want to expose myself to more. It's to have you experience that higher version of reality, is to move out of that transactionality and move into a space where there is that freedom, there is the possibility to explore the higher version of yourself for you, which is a term that I don't like, but I also somehow can't express better the light-hearted feeling of when you leave behind all of those thoughts, all of those constrictions, all of those rules that are dragging us down, judgment and so on. And so I realized I couldn't bring that person here. He was actually dragging me down. And at the beginning, I was like, the problem is that client. And then I realized the problem is that I wasn't patrolling the container well enough, because he fell back into judgment. He fell back into resistance and non-permission. And so, the container is there until you patrol it and until you nurture it. And sometimes you fail, and it's also fine.
You have it written in one document, like, I guess, very clearly what is your container.
I have my ground rules, yeah. And I ask clients to add, ideally, a ground rule that is specifically for them, because I want to understand because my journey is co-designed with people. And with this, I mean that the practicalities are that, I charge people into a bandwidth financially, and I ask them to choose how much they pay, because it's very relevant for me that they are in integrity themselves as it comes to the money conversation.
Oh, wow. Nice.
The money conversation is the most important one, because, most of these people, as much as every one of us, continuously have commercial exchanges with people. And the concept of how much money / value they want to dedicate to the journey is a conversation that happens at the very beginning and is extremely real, because what I love about coaching is that it has to be live. So, we can talk about you and your life, but the more is something that is also really happening in between us, such as the money conversation, which affects me for real. Like, if you tell me you're going to pay me 10 euros, I mean, you can't, it's outside of my bandwidth, but if you tell me that you want to pay me X, the lower amount, instead of Y, the higher amount, that does affect me. And so this makes us really in the container. The container is alive. And that's one element of it, of the transactionality. And sometimes I tell people, if you're doubtful, start with the minimum and pay a bonus at the end. And that bonus can be €1. It's written down in our agreement. But I want you, after the 6 months, to look back, because I know today you don't know how much this is going to open up for you, how much this is going to open up for you in your life. And so you'll have to reconsider the exchange of money for value, which is also beautiful to see that people then have that ability to recognize the value. And then the other element is that how much time I actually spend with someone is unrelated to how much they pay. So once they are in, they are a project. They last on average 6 months. And we can work together, in person, in nature, online, only on the phone, for a vertical of 5 hours per day, or distributed. But that is something we co-design together, depending on their needs and their pace. And equally is the element of the ground rule that I ask them to bring in. I already want them, and maybe it doesn't come in at the beginning, but I want them to co-design the container with me. And whether there is something that is specific for them, whether it's related to judgment, whether it's related to performance, whether it is related to payment and the money conversation, we put it in as part of the container. I think one of the ground rules that I hadn't mentioned yet, but I think it's I'm in these days I'm realizing how powerful it is the one about intensity and about all in and no back doors. Which is something that it's one of the rules that is sometimes is the easiest to patrol and sometimes is the hardest, and ultimately is the decision for both sides to be fully committed and fully enrolled to the journey. And what I always share with people is that rule is true for both of us. So it's not just that they are fully no backdoors, but I literally say in my ground rules, I am a fully no backdoors proposition. So it's something that I define first. And this is because I have learned from the person who got me into what I do today, how much the commitment of the other person is like a magnet to my commitment. And so I recently had a founder with whom we were supposed to be together in San Francisco. Then he had something going on in Europe with his company, so he couldn't be there. And that was the time that I wanted to dedicate to this in-person work with him and with other founders that I have in San Francisco. So I stayed there a month and I couldn't really work with him because he wasn't there. And then we said, okay, let's have a date in Europe, but then this was going to be changed. And then he told me like a week before the date, he said, yes, I'm in for that date. And I said, okay, let me see if this feels right for me. And then I sent him a letter saying, I want to show up as the best version of myself. And to say yes would be to not be the best version of myself. I would do it just out of FOMO and out of the idea that I have to give you this in-person time now. But it wouldn't respect you because we wouldn't have enough time. We didn't have the preparation, and you're worth so much more. And I know how hard it is for you to commit ahead of time to a date. And it is hard for me as well. So exactly for that reason, I want the two of us to uplift our game with you and for you. And to do this for me is I am growing, right? Like it's me growing. And obviously for the client he gets the chance to be, I'm enrolling myself and I'm committing myself fully. So automatically the client is like sucked in. But for me, it's beautiful because it means that I am continuously in this learning process. I'm continuously in this growth, which is personal, right? It's professional, but it's also personal.
Wow. It's incredible. I've been thinking about many things. I was listening carefully, but also thinking to some things while you were talking.
I saw you listening carefully.
Yeah. I will share something that if I imagine myself doing the coaching with you, I don't know if it's possible, but just imagining a little fear that comes into my mind,
Yes.
which is, I mean, I can see the fact that it can be an awesome accelerator. I mean, you told me many, many things. Once I see the recording, new things will pop up into my mind, which haven't popped up yet. But I would say that the victim thing was really amazing for me to recognize that. And second, the verticality. So I see the fact that it's an accelerator. So if we would have met in 1 month, maybe other opportunities would have come and I would have stayed in my corner because of the victim thing that I wouldn't see. So wow, it really is amazing. But one little thing that I am afraid, I would love to do such a journey with you, but I would be afraid that, and I know what is going to be your answer, I guess, sorry, what is going to be your answer, but yet I would be afraid that then in some situation in life, instead of like acting and taking my own decision, I would be like, this is a big thing to process. So I have to talk to Caterina because you're such a powerful person and coach. And so one fear is after 6 months, which maybe is not a fear, is actually a beautiful thing. Like there is somehow dependency, client to coach, which again, I was thinking about this as a fear. Now that I'm talking out loud, maybe it's like I don't want to be accelerated for 6 months. Want to be accelerated for 1, 2, whatever. So is it a fear? I don't know. Probably not. And the second fear, which is related to me, is I like the intensity thing. I was already imagining like, oh, what if I do a journey with Caterina? And whenever you're like, you have to say one rule for the container, my rule would have been intensity. Like before you mentioned it, like for me it would have been, don't be afraid of my resistance. Like tell me as much things as you see. Like don't be afraid to hit me in a positive way. But then something I say is, I mean, the frequency is not determined, but in 1 week from now, am I able to own, for example, the victim issue, let's call it like that, and not like talk again about it. And now, you see, when I'm talking in a messy ways because I'm thinking out loud, I mean, I feel there is a sense of urgency. So like there are 6 months. I want it to be intense and I want to make every single meeting, interaction count. So here there's a judgment within myself because I would judge myself is the week after. And maybe there is also some verticality. So like the time with you is so precious that the next time we have to work on another thing and not this thing, this gotta be solved. So you see, nothing depends on you, it's just something on my own, which is one, the time is very, very the pressure. We need to make everything count. Will I be able to make everything count and own everything 100%? Because I would judge myself if I don't. I drop a little bit of things now in a little bit of unstructured way.
Beautiful. I want to start from the dependency. I love that you mentioned that, and it's something that I always say. Why I'm not like, sometimes people are like, you work with startups, are you a consultant? And I'm like, no, because what I want to give you is tools that stay with you. Like now that you've learned about yourself being the victim, you're gonna catch yourself being a victim. So you upgrade yourself during the 6 months, and what is there for sure is an addiction to that space, to that mental space, to that growth. That is sure. Like you, in 6 months, you will just want more. but you will not necessarily want more from me. A, because there are other amazing professionals outside there, but B, because there is also, and yes, the majority of the people I work with, if not all of them, work with me longer. And I have chapter 2 and I have chapter 3 and I have a year contract for people that are really deep into the relationship. Or I have clients to whom I say, why don't you take 6 months of pause in which, however, I'm available and we can, speak every now and then. Every journey is a bit different. What I always say is the relationship is for a lifetime. We will be in the coaching container for the 6 months, but we will ultimately be in this process forever. Like, I'm there as a person in everyone's life in different ways afterwards. And I think that I love that you spotted yourself being the victim in the dependency, because part of the journey is exactly that. How do you take authority within yourself? Where is your inner authority so that you can walk on your own legs, whether it's in 6 months, whether it's in 2 days? Because ultimately, when you start, the verticality is there. And then the more you go on, the more it becomes eye to eye. And then you realize it is always helpful to have an external mirror. And I can also walk in the world without it for 2 months, 3 months, or just have a continuous relationship where, it's also very different. There's people I work with who are in a transformation, like people that are in a transition work-wise. And then it makes a lot of sense to have something very concentrated. There's people who are in a trajectory, they're CEOs of a company. It's a 1-year project most of the times. And it's generally 6 months plus 1 year. Because it's work that is drop by drop. And it's much deeper. We work also on the people that work for them. So it's a bit different. And I think one element which concerns me in this story is the reason why I always tell people what I think is because I tell them what I think is right or wrong, if I manage not to make it as right or wrong, but as my intuition, doesn't really count. Ultimately, you'll have the responsibility to take the decision by yourself. And so that's, again, the reason why I don't ask questions as if I can lead you to the realization of your life. I'm just going to put you in front of something. And my version of the story is also limited. Someone else would put you in front of another angle of it. And so, again, at the beginning, I do understand that there is the verticality. Everyone tells me at the beginning, yeah, okay, it's going to be eye-level relationship, but I don't feel it today. And I'm like, okay, let's check in over time, because we will work so much on your inner authority, on allowing you to define your own truth, that what I tell you will be something that allows you to have, it's like a piece of the puzzle that allows you to see the full picture, and then you commit to whatever is right for yourself, which is ultimately the whole part of the whole goal of the journey.
Mm-hmm. It's a part of the container.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that your fear is absolutely A, understandable, and B, I love how you reframed it. It may not be bad that I want more.
Maybe it's actually the opposite of, yeah. And the second, I'm being super personal now, not like
this.
generic.
And I think it's everyone's fears. It's very rightful. What was the second one again?
That I want to make every little or big interaction count.
Yes.
Because as it is so precious this time, and I have, 60, 100, 1,000 slots, and I have the opportunity to accelerate and solve potentially 1,000 slots, I want to solve 1,000, not 60.
Yeah. Which is also something many people tell me, especially some point I feel like they feel there is scarcity of time on my side, either because they know that I am at capacity with clients, and sometimes because they're going toward the end of their journey. This is the same of you. It's not going to be super easy to see this straight away, but it's the same mechanism of you thinking that you cannot have a conversation with Julio because this doesn't tick all your boxes. Because what happens there is that that intensity that we want to have on the journey is not well distributed. And so it ends up being catalyzed in urgency and in a fear of now or never, in a fear of this must be the thing. So
True.
you were present. Sorry, you were going to say.
True. Yeah, I said true. And the also the ROI, because I guess it's a huge investment. I don't know, I'm assuming, maybe again because of verticality. So one thing is this gotta be it. But again, you said in the container is we have to agree that we don't know what's gonna happen. Like I'm gonna use my intuition my best. I'm gonna show up and use my intuition the best way to throw you what I feel, and then and then it's up to you. So we don't know what's gonna happen.
There is also this component. If you zoom out from the work conversation, does it really matter what is the first 10 hours per week project that I start now that I want to engage with the outer world again? It matters as long as it's in the container, but it's not what I commit to for the rest of my career, 60 hours per week, right? So that zooming out perspective is also true when it comes to coaching. Right now it's going to be a life-changing experience, but hopefully it puts you on a trajectory where from there is just exponential life-changing experiences, right? And so once you see that, and once you zoom out from the need of today I need to deliver something because I'm paying this a lot, I'm making a huge investment, and you know, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, which I'm like, even when I say it, I'm like, wow. Then when you zoom out, you see the vastity of your life, and it's something that I really love to work on with people. How can we be present right now with all of our intensity?
Yeah.
And at the same time realize that this is again just a drop, right? How can I show up in this podcast right now and be like, this is my time, like this is my chance to be out in the world, this is going to change people's lives and my career, and at the same time be like,
it's a drop. Yeah, everything is a drop.
There have been and there will be tons of stage opportunities, tons of other podcasts, tons of other interviews, tons of other conversations with clients or with VCs or events and so on. And so the possibility to do that zoom out, but at the same time to be so committed that now this is the only thing that I am into, and this is the only reality that exists. And it's really beautiful.
Yeah, because go ahead, sorry.
No.
I go. Yeah, because I'm falling in the trap of the reactivity. So if I'm reactive, I cannot be present. Yeah.
And often people ask me, it's again the balance between the detachment and being back in the outer world. People ask me, how can I achieve more and more and more without being in a needy mindset, without being in my not enoughness conversation? Because it's easy to achieve a lot if you just think, I don't have enough. I have to make more money. I have to fundraise more. I have to have higher revenues. I have to hire more people. I have to have more girlfriends. I have to travel more. I have to publish more. I have to write more. I have to have more followers. How can I push for all of that, or the part of that which is healthy and allowing me to expand as an individual, coming from a place of I actually have enough, right? So how can this is what I always say is when people ask me whether I'm looking for clients, this is to me the best example of that fine line. I am always looking for clients and I'm always at capacity, which doesn't make sense, because how I define it is I am extremely happy for the depth, the quality of the conversations, the transformations, the financial exchange, and the level of leadership of the people I work with. At the same time, I want more. And the fact that I can be satisfied with that and be satiated, this was a big part of my journey, the concept of being satiated, because I lived in a space where I call it the bottomless bucket. I felt like I, and literally my body, I eat a lot. That's because I used to do a lot of sports, but also because I literally sometimes have a bucket that I continuously fill up with experiences, with challenges that I want to achieve, with conversations with people, with work-related targets that I want to meet. And the problem is that the bucket doesn't have a bottom. And so I throw in stuff and it's just always empty. And it took me a lot of time to create a bottom for that bucket and sit down. How you do it is that you sit down at the bottom. So you sit down when the bucket is empty, when you don't have any of the things that you feel like you need. And you're like, actually, the bottom of this bucket is great. I'm just very grounded, very relaxed. There's nothing. That is the detachment, right? Like,
it's a constant exercise you have to do.
Mm-hmm,
you want to do if you want to be present.
And that concept of how does it feel to be satiated, where I actually have enough, I am satiated, and yet I can be thinking about what I want to create next. I can be in this moment showing up to create the best next thing for myself, the best next client opportunity, the client that will have the most impact in the world, the companies that will be the more successful that I can invest into. But still, I am satiated and I operate from
everything is fine, yeah. Yeah, because that's the way to put yourself out of the reactivity and be present.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it reminds me of the samurai who would meditate their own death before going into battles many times, because only in that way, when they would be into battles, they would fight in the best possible way, knowing that they might die, but by detaching to that, they were able to fight in the best possible way and have the highest chance of surviving.
Yes. Whenever founders come to me with anxieties about fundraising, we run through the scenario in which they can't fundraise.
Mm-hmm.
Concretely, like what happens? We train the brain to go deep into the place that they're the most scared of, and I ask them, or I do it. Sometimes I do it first. It's the envisioning process. I do it first. I'm like, okay, now you just listen and you see what happens in your body when I describe this. You cannot fundraise, shut down the company. You have to communicate this to people. You don't have an income anymore, and it's not tragic. It's just like the facts, right? And they're like, contraction at the beginning, and then also realizing I have a lot of free time. Yeah, I would have to go to a cheaper apartment, but my partner can support me a bit. And then it's like death, because for them it's perceived as death. It's not that bad. Let me go into battle. Let me go into this fundraising call, knowing that if I don't get money from this investor, I'm gonna die potentially, and it's gonna be great. If the company fails, right? And it's I think in my personal experience, the realization that the bottom of the bucket that we're trying to fill up is actually okay. And once we meet the essential level of needs, then we can live with the light heart and achieve things from there. Many people, high achievers, are afraid that if they don't activate that intensity high achieving mechanism, they're just going to lose on opportunities. The FOMO on their achievements is just like always here, and it's something that they need to experience upon. Is they take the leap, they literally take the leap of jumping the edge, and they see that was great. Mm-hmm. I achieved more the moment in which I let go of my little goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. One thing I wanted to ask you is, you're the mirror and the guide to many people. I'm curious to know, who's your mirror? I mean, in life, everyone is a mirror, right? In our relationship, but who's your Caterina, let's say?
Well, I always say that if I am a good coach, there is a big reason, which is the person who coached me. But there is also my partner, who has I call him high emotional maintenance person. I always say that the work that we do in a partnership is the biggest work we're ever going to do, because it's the closest, it's the most intimate relationship we have, and the person that we are comes up 360 degrees there. There is money conversation, there is ego conversation, there is the physical conversation, there is expectations, judgment. So there is neediness, everything is there. So that's my field of growth. And part of the work that I do with co-founders or with C-level teams comes from the work that I do in a partnership. Because I think that ultimately both those relationships are partnerships. And so the work that is done to understand at a deeper level how we function in a romantic partnership, you know, the way an individual works, functions there, then shows up also in teams. And hence certain dynamics are very relevant and similar. And that's a big field of growth for me. There is my coach, who is a financial advisor and who coached, that's her main job, and who coached me for 40 days in a row. So we spoke every day for 1 hour for 40 days, including Saturdays and Sundays, in a period in which I was traveling through conferences and in the midst of my VC career, and I was taking calls in hotels with her at 2 a.m. after speaking at conferences, and I was like, really a separate reality was starting to exist together with my VC world. And she's still, I think, the person that mostly supports me in seeing. I just had a call with her yesterday because my partner told me, I think you need supervision. And I said, hi, emotional maintenance person, I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. Let's do it. And she's for sure, regardless of whether it's about a client or myself, which is in the end always about myself, she's the person that I go to. Because and I have many other people. There is an amazing group of coaches that I am part of, which I'm deeply honored and grateful for. They're mostly based in the US, and they're incredibly experienced people that are providing guidance. I think what my coach has given me, which is the one thing that is for now still mostly unmatched, is the complete lack of transactionality in how she sets up relationships, because her main job is being a financial advisor. And so the way she shows up with me is, and how connected she is to what she wants to bring into the world with her coaching, is something very unconventional and really quite otherworldly. And so the way, I think, I've met many intelligent people that, whether they're coaches or mentors, doesn't really matter. But I think that what she brings in the field is a lack of transactionality, which is really special, and which immediately connects me to something really truthful, where all of the stories that I bring into my everyday life are gone, and there is space for truth.
There's space for truth.
Yes.
Wow, super nice. All right, Kate, I'm really thankful. Like, we touched just 20% of this diagram over here, but I'm happy that I received a coaching session. Let's see if it's the first one or if there are gonna be others. But wow, I can say firsthand that it's amazing.
It was my pleasure. I knew it was going to be amazing, so I'm very grateful that we had the time to do this. And I'm very grateful that you came to Berlin for this.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And that you saw the current place where some of the magic happens, but for now.
Yeah, I can tell. Thank you.
Thank you.